I give that I may grow, for in spending myself I mint the coin of completion, is a quote I found written on a slip of paper inside a poetry book a couple weeks ago. The book was donated to an antique store in Providence. Inside of the cover was a girl's wishes to her older sister's 21st birthday, dedicated in 1964. The girls would be in their 80s today if they're still around. With the little time we have in this life, how often do we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be human, above the levels of mineral, plant, and animal? We pay high regards to our intellect, claiming it to be our defining characteristic, but what have we spent it on? Did our inventions such as the steam engine, airplane, telegraph, TV, and smartphone result only from the intellect? We pride ourselves in these technologies we have gained, which have helped us transcend space and time, but how often do we question the human aspects which we have lost? We exist in a profit-driven system where capital is the greatest motivator, and under these conditions our freedom has been reduced to the freedom of consumption. The sphere of the arts and humanities have never been as profitable as the physical sciences, because in the sphere of the physical sciences, answers are always guaranteed to be found with more resources and time, for these sciences live in a set of universal laws that only deal with the physical. The main goal of these sciences is to order things, making them quantitative, capable only in the physical realm. The arts and humanities, on the other hand, deal with the qualities of life, seeking after freedom. The arts cost very little money and therefore produce very little money, lowering their place on the economic and social ladder. In schools, human progress is recounted as scientific progress, the conduct of which is impossible without technology. In this manner, human progress is inseparable from technological progress. But technology also comes from and continues to serve only the quantitative sphere. This is why we should be deeply alarmed when technologies such as AI attempt to take a seat at the table in the qualitative spheres, such as in fields of education and government. The humanities must only be shaped by the very thing in its title, humans. This is because machines and programs are ontologically binary, black and white, on and off, right or wrong. What should grow along with these definite technological developments are the systems of man. These systems of government and education do not have one right or wrong and everlasting answer. This is because humans are more complex than any machine will ever be. To progress this qualitative sphere, which shapes the complex and ever-changing nature of humanity, requires the full participation of the human being. From the sensing to the intuitive feeling to the questioning to the analytical thinking. But in this landscape of ours, the curiosity to investigate the status quo, the courage to challenge the status quo, and the creativity required to change the status quo are not only silenced but structurally undermined with media technologies. Yet, under utopic systems such as these, people will always prefer comfort over conflict. There are many ways why the media machine works. Firstly, when the people are overstimulated and overwhelmed, they can be pacified by the very thing that overwhelms them, creating an endless feedback loop. As a result, people are anesthetized with a hollow pleasure that creates disregard for what the politicians or billionaires are up to. Secondly, signs of individual laziness or moral decay are only products of the cultural machine. Under the tarp of our profit-motivated system, no one's attention is an exception to becoming a commodity. Meaning, whenever you're scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, or whatever platform to decompress, you exist in the system's ideal state of unreflective consumption. Inevitably, you outsource your brain to Silicon Valley, your thoughts to artificial intelligence, and all the hours which make up your life to the device of entertainment. Indoctrination from our religious and educational institutions have moved into the individualized content which lives inside our individual light boxes. And so, human freedom is degraded into a mere freedom of choice in consumption, if we can even call it choice, given that this free time of ours is co-opted by the 1%. When machines first appeared, they formed in their wake a new kind of human being which was required to operate those systems. People became slaves to the clock as well as to wages. These jobs had little humanistic value by alienating the worker from seeing the consequence of their work. This industrialization meant that human will was no longer meaningful on Earth. We had donated our will to the machine in trade for efficiency and the perceived freedom of time and choice. These devices of advertising, mass media, and consumer psychology hid in the guise of selling products or supply, all the while manufacturing human desire or demand. In this way, complacency spills over from one's monotonous work life into their very own inner being and consciousness. But with media entertainment, no longer do we feel the suppression that was once felt when we outsourced our labor to machines during the Industrial Revolution. Either way, a compliant person is one less likely to notice the absurdity of their conditions, one less likely to be in touch with their senses and self enough to object. Of course, political consciousness is only one branch of consciousness, but it's one we can easily note, for it has been dissolved by our culture of entertainment. Inside the world of politics, we see that the superficial stance of enlightened centrism has become the ideal of our passive population. Instead of choosing one side to argue for, these people tend to see themselves as enlightened by saying things like, both sides are extreme, or communism is just as bad as capitalism, or violence can never be justified. The appealing fact of these statements is that they come from a place of common sense. Most of the time, these people are not looking to learn new information or understand their own biases. Instead, they are the result of a population trained on a culture which replaces analysis with opinion, as can be seen everywhere in social media. The problem is not even the shallow concern of the people, but rather how the curiosity which is necessary to investigate anything has become a rarity. Yet this fragmentation of reality, which frames each event as moral decay rather than political consequence, is only the logical outcome of a society raised to react to symbols and images. In her 1977 book On Photography, Susan Sontag explores how the device of photography makes people apolitical by promoting passive observation over action. This is because constant image consumption transforms real-world atrocities into consumable aesthetic objects, ultimately detaching viewers from the suffering of others and creating a superficial illusion of ethical engagement, stating, quote, "Needing to have reality confirmed and experience enhanced by photographs is an aesthetic consumerism to which everyone is now addicted. Industrial societies turn their citizens into image junkies. It is the most irresistible form of mental pollution," end quote. After all, it is the medium of photography which media is centered around. Photography's forces which are only enhanced by cinematography or the moving image. And today, people's conception of the wider world comes most crucially from these scattered short-form videos of social media. Once sedated by the shallow stimulation of social media, the news, or your favorite TV show, consumption begins to feel like pleasure, keeping the public numb in their belief that social media, streaming platforms, influencer culture, pornography, and gaming communities exist as an outlet for the freedom of expression or entertainment. When in reality, this online cultural sphere is the latest market for people to happily and willingly submit to, letting the tech billionaires profit on the fabric of the people's time, which makes up the entirety of one's life. And so the machine of capitalism incessantly appoints an individual's identity to purely the material economy. You are what you wear, buy, eat, watch, or anything you post. The external objects of perception have become more important than the perceiving being entirely. The consumer experience is inseparable with all other industries. The fact that TikTok has a shop, that ads are littered all over the internet and in real life are the direct contributors to the rapidization of trends, and the incredible ease and comfort of pursuing which is directly weighing down our earth at an unprecedented pace. These ridiculous amounts of overconsumption have been normalized by the media, which also conveniently frames the deterioration of our planet Earth to be at the fault of the people and not the systemic issues of overproduction. Stimulation has taken the place of satisfaction, convenience has taken the place of autonomy, and personal worth is only measured by productivity. Byung-Chul Han argues that the ever-rising psychological distress we see in modern society is mainly produced by the constant pressure to self-optimize and be hyper-productive. In this world, our self-knowledge has become external development, once again making technology inseparable from the self. Multitasking being valued in this society is only one sign of how one is no longer exploited by domination, but rather one self-exploits. Because of this historical work we constantly place ourselves in, immersive reflection has been displaced by hyper-attention. To think critically, to contemplate, to question, and to create all require time and space, which is time and time again evicted from the roofs of late-stage capitalism. One's own imaginative, critical, and creative ability slows circulation and consumption and is therefore deemed unfit for the pace and purpose of this system. The phenomenon of technological outsourcing is termed interpassivity for a reason, whereby allowing many freedoms to exist in the online dimension, our desire for freedom to be carried out in real life is diluted. When the desire for activity in us is fulfilled by the activity inside the screen, we become a passive populace on planet Earth. On top of the machines that once deactivated our will, we are now enveloped in the modern devices which also deactivate our human faculties of thinking and feeling. In his pivotal book, The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul, which came out 72 years ago, he states, quote, "There has been one industrial revolution, and that consisted in the replacement of human muscle as a source of energy. There is a second revolution in the making whose object is the replacement of the human brain. We are not there yet." End quote. 72 years later, we have arrived, but this is not the sort of revolution we should pride ourselves in. But I would like to expand upon the categorization of humans as muscle and brain. In order to understand the full dimensionality of the interactions between technology and man, we must first believe man to be more than brain and muscle. In Anthroposophy, a set of spiritual beliefs that Rudolf Steiner founded, the human being exists as a fourfold being, consisting of the physical as can be seen in minerals, the etheric, the life force that moves the physical as can be seen in plants, the astral, mainly our desires and emotions as can be seen in animals, and the ego, which is the uniquely human part of us. The power and influence that modern and quantitative scientific institutions hold, hand in hand with media, again, not only molds our way of physical life, but more dangerously our spiritual life. This subjugation of beliefs can be seen with the reigning doctrines of materialism, instructionism, reductionism, scientism, positivism, determinism, atomism, and fatalism, etc., all of which encompass methods of observing reality that rely strictly on a quantitative lens. Ultimately, our ego, our sense of I, and our identity has been obscured, but it's only with this highest capacity of ours can we access the ability to contemplate, to imagine, to question, to reflect, to think deeply, and to create. So what sets humans apart? What force drove our inventions which led up to this technological state? It was not merely the intellect, but a force which cannot be trained or captured, which is that of human creativity. I give that I may grow. The paradox is that entertainment technologies, by providing instant gratification, feel like an escape from the draining modes of capitalism, while it remains as one of capitalism's most powerful tools. The system no longer demands your labor, but every second of your stillness, by cementing the gaps with constant stimulation and weeding out the states of boredom and slowness which would allow reflection, therefore dulling, inhibiting, and replacing the spot in which consciousness and awareness is formed within the human being. A new type of human is formed, one less literate, less articulate, less developed in all their senses, and therefore less in tune with themselves and the world around them. Yet, when we find ourselves in this predicament, we must ask ourselves which fields require the human centers of curiosity, consciousness, awareness, and creativity to be the most active. We will find it to be the arts. Even from a century back, Steiner has said, quote, "This unity must be reattained, for the schism between science and art has disrupted the very being of man. To pass from the state of disruption to unity and inner harmony, it is for this above all that modern man must strive." End quote. Throughout human evolution, the developments of technology have pushed out the search for cosmic, therefore eternal, truth from science. Without a doubt, our current mode of government, capitalism, is a result of our technological ambition. Seeing that capitalism as it stands cannot exist without its technological methods, yet the governing forces of technology are independent of the structures of capitalism. The capitalist mode of production and its consequential social structures not only strips the human being from their sense of self, the ego, but also from their sense of community, belonging, and meaning before selling commodities as replacements. Today, more than ever, the sense of self is built from material things. No longer do we regard natural beauty as truth, but rather we say that both beauty and truth belong subjectively in the eye of the beholder. The worshipper of technology believes itself to be politically independent, believing that social problems can be solved with supercomputers, seeing poverty as a data problem, and the collapse of our natural world as an engineering task. But as we have stated, qualitative issues cannot be solved with quantitative tools. Still, people remain complacent in the implications of techno-feudalism, that there is no need for collective action or structural change, just more advanced tech. But technological determinism is fundamentally incompatible with human progress, as Steiner quotes. Human beings are not idle onlookers observing the progress of the world, merely recapitulating in their minds images of events that take place in the cosmos and in which they are not involved. They take an active part in the creation of the world's progress. Perceptive insight is the most perfect thing in the organism of the universe. End quote. AI obliterates this insight. On art, Steiner says, quote, "Of these revelations through art, one thing at least can be said with certainty. They act upon the soul with convincing power and permeate our feeling with a conviction of their truth, in face of which all merely rational or logical considerations are powerless. Art is called upon to transfuse the transient and the perishable with the light of the eternal, the imperishable. That is the mission of art." End quote. So, if we are ready to accept the fact that we're free beings, then instead of rationalizing substitutional technologies, we must insist that human thought, human insight, and human creativity is indispensable, because a society which no longer values thinking is incapable of challenging the systems that created it, not to mention create a way out. But here is the paradox. Because we exist in this closed-looped system, the word creator is now interchangeable with being a content creator. This video is perfect proof of this, as it's just one of many thousands which exists inside the very app they criticize. But before we move on with our lives, let us remember the wise stranger who once wrote, "I give that I may grow, for in spending myself I mint the coin of completion."